Good morning, everyone. I'm Rick Gosha. I'm Senior Vice President for the California Institute for Behavioral Health Solutions. It's part of our mission at CIBHS to assist providers to advance health equity through their practices and behaviors. For this reason, we've updated our webinar series topics to help you support people receiving services through public health crises. On July 8, we are offering a webinar that will provide tools and strategies to address implicit bias, which can undermine effective behavioral telehealth. On July 15th, we will be sponsoring a panel of behavioral health providers offering telehealth in communities of color in order to learn more about their strategies and innovations. Please see the link in the chat to visit the CIBHS website to register for these two webinars. Right now, I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Kelly Spencer, who I've had the privilege of working with at the University of Kansas for many years and continue to work with today. Kelly serves as an implementation specialist and behavioral health advocate for the University of Kansas School of Social Welfare. They directly support community behavioral health agencies in developing recovery-oriented and strengths-based programs that center the uniqueness, choice, and dignity of every individual seeking support from the behavioral health system. They have experience in supporting the implementation of several evidence-based practices, including wellness management and recovery, housing first, common ground shared decision-making, whole health action management, wellness recovery action plan, peer support services, and strengths model case management. Kelly's passions include intersectional liberation and activism, all things nerdy, long distance walking, photography, spending time with their two cats, and finding solace in nature. So without further ado, I welcome my colleague and friend, Kelly Spencer.
Thanks for that, Rick. Thank you for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on self-management supports. I'm Kelly, and my pronouns are they, them, their. It's a real honor to be sharing this learning space with you all. And today's webinar is really meant to offer some dialogue and tools around supporting individuals in self-management of their wellness and their recovery. Our hope is that you are able to take something from today's webinar and begin testing it and implementing it either in your work with individuals or for yourself personally, as most of us are having to work really hard to find space and new ways of practicing self-care in today's uncertain and chaotic world. Even if it's just one idea, one thought from our time together today, I've really always viewed a webinar as worth the time in that regard. But before we move forward any further with material for today, I think it's vital we take a moment to recognize what we are all facing in today's world right now, particularly for the BIPOC communities. If we really want to impact our systems of care, we must recognize all of the intersections of oppression and inequity the people we support face. We must all also recognize that the manifestations of these inequities are not all symptoms of mental illness. They are the effects of intergenerational historical trauma. And there are many things that contribute to people not feeling well. And there are things within our society that contribute to people's extreme states of being. So the image here represents the gap on how we measure success or not success, and the inequity and the disparity that often exists in those gaps. So for example, we measure the rates of those with mental health challenges in prison, but do we measure who is exactly in prison for things like marijuana charges and who isn't? We measure the return to post-secondary education, but do we measure who actually has access to education and who doesn't? We measure homelessness rates, but do we measure who is actually at risk of far higher rates of homelessness. So really, I mean, the bottom line is the way you are feeling right now is not an abnormality. It is a manifestation of the abnormal inequity that exists in our society, and in particular, our systems of care. And I think there's a real danger in the work we do, in the sense, you know, it tends to focus on the immediate billable symptoms, but does not always address the underlying causes of those symptoms. And I know for me personally, I've often thought about how things would be different in this field if we just replace the words mental health with social justice. So as we move forward with today's webinar, I'm going to ask you to try to hold space for that thought and for your feelings, for everything we're experiencing right now, and also for the lives that are deprived of potential because of the inequity and oppression that has existed and continues to exist in our society and the systems of care in which we work. Next slide, please. So the spirit of wellness management believes people can gain mastery over their wellness, get and stay well, work towards meaningful life goals, and lead happy, fulfilling lives on the other side of a diagnosis within our formal systems of care. And there are many words and language that describe wellness management. And so Robin, can you go ahead and drop these in under the umbrella? And they should stop at self-care. So I've always thought that it made sense as an umbrella term. And you know, and for the sake of today's webinar, we are going to predominantly use the language of self-care when we discuss wellness management. But I want to make it clear that that doesn't mean that any words someone uses to describe the ways they manage their wellness aren't meaningful or important to honor and reflect. And I also want to encourage you as we move forward today, feel free as we're going through this webinar to enter your own words to describe wellness management in the question box or the chat box. So the pulse of wellness management really exists within a space in which there is an unwavering belief in the potential and a recognition in the resilience of the narratives in which we support every day in our work. You know, we certainly can't make people recover, but what we can do is create the conditions in which recovery is most likely to grow. And really viewing every encounter we have with people as an opportunity to carry this message, to carry a message of hope. Like even in times of chaos or uncertainty or health pandemic or civil rights movements, really surrounding people with the idea that recovery and hope exists, and actively exploring with people the things in their life that bring meaning and purpose and healing and a sense of identity. Doing all of these things while helping them to activate those strategies in the context of their life outside the system are several of the shifts that wellness management strategies facilitate and that we're going to focus on today. And really, I mean, this is the heart of what this work should ultimately be about, regardless of what role or capacity we work in. Next slide, please. So these are called the core values of wellness management, but these are some of those conditions I just spoke about creating. So when we think about respect, the parameters of respect exist in not just how we engage with people face to face, but they exist in how we communicate to, with, and about people in all aspects of our work, every single aspect of our work. So from the moment people walk through the revolving doors of a mental health center to check in at the front desk, to every single contact after that, the opportunity exists to create and share these messages, to shine the light on the strengths the person possesses and explore how those strengths and efforts can help them build the life that they want for themselves. But you know, in order to do that, we have to affirm and honor the perspectives and narratives of the people we support. Yes, we bring our professional experiences about services, treatments, tools, interventions, resources, but we must also recognize that people bring in expertise about their lived experience, their desires, their aspirations, their fears, their preferences, values. And while all people may not be accustomed to knowing they have choices, or like even knowing how to make those choices, which is a learned thing that our system of care have taught people, we have to start with the belief that all people deserve the right and the dignity to make their own choices regarding their treatment, their life, and the direction that they ultimately want it to go. And I think, for us to really understand that for people to truly recover, they need to be able to have ownership of their recovery journey. And no matter like what path people decide, we can't take that personally, but really attend to the decision with curiosity and getting strategic about how we align our supports accordingly to, increase the likelihood that that pathway is going to be successful for the person. Growth doesn't happen without taking risks. And sometimes those risks don't quite work out as intended. And sometimes that's really hard for us as professionals to bear witness to. But that is ultimately how we all learn, grow, and change as human beings. So next slide, please. So according to Oxford Dictionary, self-care is defined as the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own health, and the practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, in particular during periods of stress. So self-management support or wellness management, it really is an art. It's an art of activating self-care, but also an art of having the space and choice to discuss and practice what brings healing into one's life. And that practice piece is really important, because learning without application is pointless. It doesn't work. Like, research has proven that. And research shows that, learning to use a new skill in the hospital, in the mental health center, in this webinar, does not guarantee that the individual is going to be able to transfer the skill into their own home environment in the real world where life happens. And that's because people retain 10% of what they read and 90% of what they say and do. And so that's where wellness management support seeks to really help individuals in transferring the skills being explored and discussed outside the room in which the support is given into the context of their lives and the community of their choosing, and the place that they call home. Next slide, please. So I want to help you visualize this. So let's say this cup represents a person's capacity. And side note, like, I never got an A in art in school, so bear with my images here. But let's say this cup represents a person's capacity. And Robin, I'm going to need you to help me fill this cup up as we move along. So let's say you're working with a person, and this person has been seeking support from the mental health system for a long number of years. So go ahead and fill a little up, Robin. Let's say this person identifies as a trans woman of color and want to fill that cup up. And let's say they've faced poverty and abuse for most of their life. So their cup is going to fill up even more. Let's say they've witnessed discrimination and been on the receiving end of it since they were old enough to remember. That cup's going to keep filling up. Let's say they've lost their housing because of their identity. The cup continues to fill up. And as a means of survival, let's say this person turned to drug use and selling to get their basic needs met. So the cup is going to continue to fill up. Let's also say that this person is living with HIV and has minimal insurance coverage and can't afford one of their meds. And so just go ahead and fill it completely up, Robin. But what you see happening here to this cup, what's happened to this person's capacity? There's spillover, right? The cup is overflowing. And that's because we as people can only hold so much before spillover happens. And for some people, the spillover produces these things we know as symptoms, extreme states of being, crisis, so on and so forth. But think of the implications of this right now during COVID and the struggle for civil rights for hundreds of years. The stress and trauma that we are all experiencing in the world right now, from economic hardship to a global pandemic to the continual struggle for human rights in the face of racism. We can only hold so much. We can only hold so much before there's spillover. So now think of a person's capacity in relation to their intersections of marginalization and the vulnerabilities that may exist within those. So one way to look at this is through the lens of a model that's called the stress vulnerability model. Let me illustrate it one step further. Next slide, please. And you can go ahead and click all the images on, Robin. Thank you. So the stress vulnerability model provides a platform and framework to really begin exploring the factors that may contribute to the onset of wellness challenges. It's really a starting point of exploration to help people begin to explore and develop their own understanding of their experiences. And this model suggests that wellness challenges may arise from the combination of two factors. They may also arise just from one factor. But for most people, it's a combination of two factors. And those factors are trauma and stress. And so trauma are life and societal experiences, abuse, inequity, oppression, biological vulnerability, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And stress is simply the challenges we face in our lives today. But what is important about this is what we know about intergenerational trauma is that it creates changes in our body that are transmitted generation to generation through our bloodlines. And the idea and the study of this is actually called epigenetics. If you're fascinated or want to learn more, hit that Google button and check out epigenetics. So there was a study of Holocaust survivors that was done a number of years ago, and they explored two lines of descendants. So one group of descendants came from a line that had to hide, were in the camps, witnessed the horrors and experienced the horrors firsthand. And the second group of descendants came from a line that were living outside of Europe and were able to avoid the horrors firsthand. And so they decided to research the social histories and sample the DNA of both lines of descendants of those groups. What do you think they found? They found far higher rates of anxiety disorders and stress hormones in the descendants of group 1, whose family members witnessed and experienced the trauma firsthand and directly. So when we think about that, trauma literally imprints their generational DNA. But just think about that, the implications of that in our work for a minute, particularly around the areas of poverty and racism. So the items we label as symptoms and wellness challenges could actually be the results and effects of poverty, systemic racism, sexism, transphobia, homophobia, patriarchy. The list goes on and on and on. But what's really important about this model is that it challenges the assumption that wellness challenges are a weakness, right? Or a result of a flawed personality, or symptoms that just need to be medicated, or the person's own fault. The really important aspect here is that society produces a lot of effects of trauma and that they manifest themselves in different ways for people. And sometimes when these two areas collide, wellness challenges and vulnerabilities happen. But there are things that people can do to take care of themselves and lessen the impact of these vulnerabilities. So we're going to get into what that looks like. So next slide, please, Robin. And you can go ahead and pull everything up. Thank you. So self-care is what we do to create wellness in our lives. For some people, it's the big stuff like work, family, community. And for others, it's meaningful activities, it's interests, hobbies, things we enjoy doing, like comic book collecting, spending time with pets, watching sports, hiking. The important part is that self-care is personal and reflects something very unique about each of us. And this is important to recovery because psychiatric medicine by itself can't do the work of recovery for people. There's no doubt that pill medicine can be a powerful tool to support recovery, but medicine alone can't recover or do the work of recovery for people. And while many people have to wait weeks or months to see the benefits of pill medicine, I mean, unless we're talking about like a PRN benzo, which happens pretty quickly, self-care can give us immediate instant results. We don't have to go to a pharmacy to get it, and oftentimes it's within our own organic environments at home and in our neighboring communities. And oftentimes, self-care can actually help pill medicine be more effective. And here's the deal. No amount of clinical training could have predicted that being a pet owner, a bird watcher, and being an ankle would transform my life and wellness, right? No amount of clinical training could have predicted that. Those things had to come from me. So I think COVID has really pushed us all to adapt the ways we take care of ourselves. So it is really equally important that we're also supporting people in doing the same and finding different and unique ways to bring healing into their life while practicing harm reduction around COVID and social distancing. So for example, here are 3 picks of my self-care strategies since lockdown was enacted. Things that I can do within my safe space at home, sitting on the porch every morning, watching birds, drinking my coffee, spending time with my cats who, like all pets the last few months, are getting incredibly spoiled having their owners home so much, and spending time with my nibblings through the front door. So let me give you some more examples of what self-care can look like for people. Next slide, please. So the simple act of supporting someone in developing a list of self-care can be absolutely transformative. And right now during COVID, it also provides an opportunity to explore harm reduction around those things. For example, I can only be an ankle right now through a glass door. But those visits help me get through a few more days of living alone through all of this. But this also provides a place as a supporter, for you as a supporter, to bring these items to light in times of darkness or uncertainty. So for instance, let's say you spend some time supporting someone in creating a self-care list. So you also have knowledge of those things that bring healing for that person. And let's say that person has identified crossword puzzles as self-care. And let's say you get a call from that person and they are really struggling. And you reflect this, you reflect the struggle, but you also bring to light and say something like, I know you've shared that doing crossword puzzles helps you occupy your mind elsewhere when things get intense. Do you think you could work on your crossword puzzles for an hour until our appointment? Right, so when you have knowledge of what brings healing to people's lives, you can help bring those up in times of despair or darkness, bring them to light. So this is just a generic list that aims to give some ideas around all the senses. If someone is really struggling to identify what their feel goods are, it can be a really nice starting place to help get people thinking. So feel free to use this list in that regard. Feel free to copy, write, make the list, flyers, however you'd like to use it. But it explores different ways to read, to watch, to write, to listen, to check in, to call, to play, move, and then work in your mind. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, Robin, please. Thank you. So what does this actually look like in dialogue, and what tangible actions can we do as supporters within that space of self-management supports? So some questions that you can ask yourself. What brings meaning to your life? What are you doing, or what have you done in the past to lessen the impact of stress in your life? What did you do today that made things better? What is one good thing that's happened since we last spoke or saw each other? What is one good thing you can attempt to do for yourself between now and the next time we talk? What are your sources of support right now? And what are your feel goods? And some of the actions that you can take within the space of those questions and dialogue with people is holding the space. I'm going to give you a visual for that in a second. Offer materials if it's in person. If you're helping someone create a self-care list, maybe it's someone that struggles with words or reading or writing. You know, you can offer materials for a person to make a self-care list with visuals, with paper, with magazine clippings. Offer materials for someone to really make it their own. Staying curious, shining a light on strengths, sharing ideas or lived experience with permission. I think asking permission for everything that we do is vital to creating a very equal, equitable relationship. So maybe you have an idea for voices that you've heard from someone else. You know, before we just start chiming off those things, I know you said you're struggling with voices. I work with someone else who's developed a couple strategies that are really helpful. Can I share those with you right now? Would now be a good time? So asking permission before we go there with people. Normalizing the impact of the trauma we're all experiencing right now. Staying out of judgment and helping individuals connect what they are doing to how they are feeling. And I think that last one is really important. And the crossword puzzle, I think, is an example of that. Another example of that might be you're working with someone and they share that spending time with their family is a trigger for them. It's a trigger for many of us, myself included. And when they get overwhelmed, they share with you that they get in their car and they go for a drive in the country. And remember, I'm in Kansas in the Midwest, so that's a thing here, driving in the country. But that act of getting in the car and driving in the country helps clear their mind. So you could respond with, wow, you know, it really sounds like you found a way for self-care and an act of self-care that really works for you in the moment. Can you tell me more about that? Can you tell me what's helpful about that? Maybe we could explore additional ways to help clear your mind in times of intensity so we can keep growing your list. So helping people connect what they're doing to how they're feeling and bringing those things to light. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, Robin. I'm going to give you a visual of how to hold space. When we say holding space for someone, this is what it looks like visually. This is from an activist and an artist. She does fabulous things. She has a lot of these PDFs for sale, and her information is on the works cited page at the end of this presentation. Do check out her materials. So one of the better descriptions of what holding space means that I've heard is that it means that, you know, we're willing to be alongside another person in like whatever journey they're on without judging them, making them feel inadequate, trying to fix them, or like really trying to impact the outcome. And I think it goes back to the idea that we are travel companions, right? We're not travel agents, because travel agents tell people what to do, where to go, when to wake up, where they can eat, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're travel companions. We're really moving alongside someone on their journey. Holding space is also allowing people to find their own truths from within without them feeling the pressure to succeed in a specific framework or evaluation of success. I also think sometimes there's another danger in this work, in that, you know, we try to redirect intense feelings, right, or de-escalate them, or or emotions that are really intense, versus really holding the space for what that person needs to feel in the moment. And I think that comes from a very well-intentioned place of not wanting to see the people we're supporting in such pain. But it's also our discomfort that guides the redirection and ultimately like an attempt to control the space. So I think what's really important to be able to hold space effectively and to do all of these things in the moment, in really intense moments where there's a lot of feels and a lot of emotions, is to be incredibly self-aware and self-reflective of our own vulnerabilities within this work. It's just absolutely vital to being able to truly hold space for people. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please, Robin. So the last portion of our webinar is going to focus on an actual tool that you can use, that you can take out into the field, that you can use personally. It's something that can be done one-on-one, but it's also a tool that works really well in group formats too. But it's around relapse prevention planning. So relapse prevention planning challenges the assumption that all relapses happen out of the blue. You know, there are things people can do to avert intense states of being or crises or symptoms. And the tool that we're going to introduce to you and provide for you involves supporting the person to develop a plan for identifying triggers when they happen, early warning signs, and then a plan of responding to those things in a very strategic way that will help lessen the impact, avert a crisis, and help people really take control and ownership of their wellness. So relapse prevention is really non-categorical, meaning, you know, you can use this for mental health, you can use this for physical health, you can use this for substance use, everyday stress, the list goes on and on. But relapse prevention planning is harm reduction. It is absolutely a form of harm reduction. And I think there's a common misconception that harm reduction really is only issues related to substance use. But harm reduction is something we all use every day of our lives, right? So like setting our alarm clocks, you know, so we reduce the risk of being late to work, buckling our seatbelt to reduce the risk that we get injured in an accident, washing our hands to reduce the risk of getting COVID, so on and so forth. So I think a lot of people are just making the connection between all of the things we're doing with COVID as harm reduction strategies to lessen the impact of getting infected. But relapse prevention planning also is really crucial right now for folks who do struggle with substance use, and how all of our social lives look vastly different than they did 4 months ago. You know, exploring high-risk situations with people, like being offered substances by a neighbor, or spending the holidays alone, boredom, seeing people use on social media, having maybe a little extra money from stimulus checks, the list goes on and on. But relapse prevention can support people to explore new ways of getting their needs met and really nurturing their authentic selves in the process. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please, Robin. So the first part is the daily self-care plan. These are the things I need to do every day to make sure I'm nurturing myself and living my best life. And then these are also the special things I can do for myself should I need extra support or healing beyond my daily plan. So this includes the specifics of what someone has identified as self-care, or the self-care list that you've supported them in creating, but really supporting folks in writing out a list of things they need to do daily to stay well. The more specific it can be, the better. So really stay curious with people in the items that they list. You know, for instance, if someone adds drinking water throughout the day, how much water? Or maybe doing yoga, what kind of yoga? And like, for how long should you do yoga every day? So it's also important to remember that relapse prevention planning, the plans themselves are always evolving and changing, just like we as people are always evolving and changing. COVID, for example, has really pushed us all to examine our lives and relationships in very new ways. So it's really important to revisit plans with people from time to time to ensure they are effective and still supporting their journey. So let me give you an example of what this daily self-care plan might look like for someone. Next slide, please. So you can see they've listed it in 2 columns. So you have a column, these are the things I need to do every day. And then you have another column, these are the special things I can do for myself, should I need. And I'm sure a lot of you have had to put your own daily plans into place during COVID, whether you knew that was relapse prevention planning or not. So feel free once again, for the benefit of the group, to type in some of the things you are doing right now for your own daily self-care plans. But this plan in particular, stay hydrated, drink at least 2 liters of water a day, so very specific. Eat 3 meals a day, take my multivitamins, feed and love on my cat Ivan, write in my daily journal, talk with my sponsor, use my self-care app for meditation and better sleep, have downtime for me, play a game or listen to a podcast. And then the special little things. When COVID is over, I'd like to go back for more detox acupuncture. So again, very specific and reflective of the current time. Rent a funny movie, buy something special for myself, color my hair, ask a friend for coffee, social distance hangout, revisit my self-care list, and pick an activity that sounds like it would feel good right now. So this daily self-care plan can be really helpful because when someone begins to experience some extreme states of being or is starting to feel like they're struggling, oftentimes it can be traced to not doing the things on their daily self-care plan. So you can also help revisit this plan with people in the moment and bring these things to light. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So the tool that we have provided to you today is called the Relapse Prevention Plan. It's in that handout section that you can download and take with you. This particular tool is out of an evidence-based practice called Wellness Management and Recovery, or WMR. And while the official name of the practice, like at the very bottom of the document, it says illness management, that's the official name of the practice, but we really view it more as wellness management because, as the case with all recovery-oriented practices and approaches, it's really about what we do in our lives to stay well. That is the focus. It's really about constantly building and rebuilding a life that brings meaning and valued identity. So when I say WMR, I'm actually referring to the one and the same practice of IMR. So we're going to go through parts of this tool and explore how you can use them either individually with people, in a group of people, or just picking and choosing topics from this actual tool to do in short snapshots with people. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Let's take a drink of water. So the first part is triggers. Triggers are external events or circumstances that may make you feel very uncomfortable. And it's important to know that these are normal reactions to abnormal life events, again. But if you don't respond to them, they may actually make you feel worse. And actual triggers and the way that they manifest themselves in our minds and bodies looks vastly different from person to person. But these are all, again, normal reactions to difficult life events. The trick is to be able to identify and respond to them as soon as possible to manage one's wellness and activate self-care as needed. Sometimes we have knowledge a trigger is in our immediate future, right? Like anniversary dates, holidays, maybe a big social event, maybe meeting with a doctor. That can be a really jarring experience for a lot of people. So let me give you some examples specifically of triggers, the external events. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, Robin, please. So some examples of triggers for some people. Remember, what may be a trigger for one person may not be a trigger for another. Going to the grocery store, watching the news, being alone so much, and walking by the liquor store. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, and I'm going to show you an action plan So supporting someone in identifying their triggers, but then on the other side of that, also supporting them in creating an action plan. So should they become triggered, being able to attend to the trigger so that they can reroute their course and have and maintain control of their wellness. Or if someone knows a trigger is coming, supporting them and visiting their action plan to begin to prepare for it so that they can nurture and navigate themselves through it more effectively. So the action plan is, when I identify a trigger or I know a trigger is in my immediate future, how will I attend to it? So I'm nurturing myself in a way that lessens the impact of it. So this person, their action plan is specific for each one of those triggers that I listed before. The grocery store, plan my list ahead, go at the least busy time, wear my mask, wash clothes, and take a shower immediately after. The news, no TV from 5 to 7 rule, go for a walk in my neighborhood in the evening, game on my computer. Feeling alone, plan times to house party app my friend Isabel and call my brother Stefan. And the liquor store, I'm going to FaceTime my sponsor, I'm going to go the long way around if I can, and I'm going to talk with my online AA group. Sometimes, because triggers can be so intense, that it can be hard to hold on to the feel goods in the moment of being triggered. So the action plan serves as a place to help prompt those things so that people can maintain control of their wellness and avert any more potential intensity or extreme states of being from the actual trigger. It's a way of, I've always thought of it as a way of helping people stay in control, even if things are out of control, if that makes sense. So let's go to the next slide, please. So the next one is early warning signs. And these are internal and maybe unrelated reactions and maybe unrelated to reactions to stressful situations. So remember, triggers are external, they happen outside of us. Early warning signs are internal. They're the subtle signs of change within us that indicate we may need to take some further action of self-care. So when someone moves past triggers into early warning signs, things are definitely a bit more serious, right? They are still able to exercise control, to activate wellness management. They just might need a place with prompts, ideas, or someone to help them carry out those actions. And that's what the relapse prevention plan is for. So let me give you some examples of early warning signs. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So again, early warning signs for some people may not be early warning signs for other people. But a list of one person's early warning signs: not sleeping or not wanting to sleep, ignoring my cat Ivan, skipping items on my daily wellness plan, and becoming very irritable. So very specific to this person. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So then in the same regard that you did for triggers, helping someone identify triggers and then creating an action plan for their triggers, you're doing the same thing for early warning signs, helping them identify early warning signs, but then also creating an action plan for them to visit should they find themselves experiencing early warning signs. So here's an example of an action plan. Go back to my self-care list, pick 3 activities to do for at least 30 minutes. So very specific amount of time that's helpful for this person. Call my brother Stefan, set my alarm to review my self-care list daily to make sure I'm actually doing it every day. Take a mental health day off responsibilities and focus on myself. And make getting sleep a priority. Call my PCP should I need a PRN for a few days to get back on track. So very specific to this person's needs. So, whether it's the actual tool of the relapse prevention plan or certain aspects of this tool, we're just really hoping it's another tool for your toolbox as practitioners or to use personally. I think sometimes we encounter folks in our systems of care that don't really respond positively. You know, when we pull out a piece of physical paper, and that again is a learned thing, because for a lot of people in our systems of care, they've had really negative experiences with paper, you know, goals that didn't reflect their own, documentation that aided, you know, and maybe an involuntary commitment, so on and so forth. So it's important we really meet people where they are. Even just bringing the topics up or the language from the tool itself with people can be stepping stones to really helping them gain control over their wellness and the direction that they want their life to go. And that really is ultimately what wellness management is all about. That's what it's all about. So let's do the next slide, please. And one more. So that concludes the actual presentation portion of self-management supports. So now we're gonna have some time for some questions. So I'm actually going to turn it back to Rick.
Hi, Kelly. Thank you so much for that presentation. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine, Rick.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much again, Kelly, just for that great presentation and laying out a lot of things related to self-management supports. We have got a few questions in, but feel free, if you have a question that you would like to bring up to Kelly, feel free to put those inside the question box, please. So Kelly, for our first question, you know, sometimes people lose access to some of their usual strategies for managing their wellness due to COVID-19. So any ideas for just having that conversation and helping people think of or explore new wellness strategies that they might be able to do while they're sheltering in place?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I think other than maybe providing with permission that list of just general ideas and exploring that with someone, you know, are there anything on this list that you think is worth trying? I think really getting down to the aspect of humanizing this experience for all of us right now. And sometimes when we can share bits and pieces of how we're getting by, again, with permission, asking before we share personal details, but even offering suggestions or ideas from other people that maybe you've heard, or from yourself, your own life at home, as a way to just begin that conversation can be really, really helpful. And I think it's also important to know that and recognize that people aren't going to have access to all of the same things because of power inequalities and inequity. And so helping people find different ways of getting their needs met and really engaging with them in a way that makes sense to them. You know, what are the things that make you feel good? What are the things that you've used before? And just having a starting place for that conversation so that you can help grow those out. But honestly, I think sharing ideas and strategies with permission from yourself, but also from other people that you work with that maybe you're going through very similar experiences, can be a really nice way to start that curiosity with someone. And it, you know, some people may be able to tell you from the get-go, like what meaning is to them. And other people are going to need time to think about, you know, what does the puzzle of my life look like? And how am I going to put these pieces back together on the other side of all of this? And so really spending time on growing trust and engagement with that person. And, you know, doing a backdrop activity sometimes can be a really great means of engaging with someone to find out what is their truth and what does hold value and meaning for a person. It's kind of a long-winded answer, but hopefully there were some ideas within that you can give a go. That's a great question.
No, thanks, Kelly. And I just wanted to say that questions are coming in fast and furious. We'll be able to get to all of them or to keep up, but also want to let you know that Kelly will be taking time to respond to some of the questions that we don't get to after the webinar that we will actually then post up on the website. But there was several questions just wanting people just to hear just a little bit more about wellness management as a practice. You mentioned that as an evidence-based practice, and how could people find more information about wellness management?
Another great question. So the practice that I briefly mentioned, it's formally called illness management and recovery, but we refer to that as wellness management and recovery. If you would like information on that practice, it's actually a complete toolkit. So it comes with a set of curriculum that you can use with people, whether that's individually or within a group format with people. It comes with a set of a toolkit or a set of curriculum that walks people through 11 different modules of all kinds of information related to wellness management. There's a module on recovery, really surrounding someone with the idea that things can get better from the get-go. There's a module on social support. There's a module on common symptoms that people experience and coping strategies for those symptoms. There's a module on getting your needs met in the mental health center, which can be a labyrinth for people, especially for people who are experiencing really extreme things. So it's a variety of different modules that you walk through with someone, and it also includes at-home practice assignments. So we talked earlier that learning without application is pointless. Like it really just doesn't work. So the at-home practice assignments provide the opportunity for someone to try one that's given within the curriculum, or they can also create their own and tailor it to their own needs. So you can work on those together. It's also very user-friendly in the sense that once you have the curriculum, it's ready to really be delivered with people. And so if you would like information about that toolkit or having support at implementing wellness management and recovery, please hit us up. You can contact me. My email is at the bottom of this presentation, or you can also contact CIBHS directly. And we'd be happy to explore with you how to get you some of that material and explore if there's any support that you or your agency could use in implementing the entire package of wellness management and recovery, which is where the relapse prevention tool is actually pulled directly from that curriculum. And I can't say enough about that curriculum. It is wonderful, user-friendly, and really important information that we really need to get in the hands of the people that we work with, because access to information and knowledge and education, like that's power. That's how we increase someone's power and transfer the power that we have to them. So yeah, please feel free, there it is. Please feel free to hit us up if you're interested in exploring that curriculum with us in more detail. Great question.
Great, thanks, Kelly. There's another question about, so any ideas for helping our coworkers who may not be participating on this webinar to adopt some of these ideas that you're talking about, self-management supports?
Yes, absolutely. Team meeting provides a vehicle to share tools and to talk about helpful things that you've learned, maybe not just in this webinar, but out in your work with people in the real world. You know, maybe you're taking this relapse prevention tool with permission from your supervisor into a team meeting and just giving a brief overview of it and maybe sharing one way that it's been helpful for you in working with the person. I think that team meetings for so many agencies and organizations are the starting place and the foundation to really begin exploring each other, not just on a professional level with tools, but also on a personal level. Because I don't think we talk about our own self-care enough in this work. We don't, and we need to. And so even spending a few minutes in team meeting every week, sharing your celebrations, what has gone well since the last time we've been together? What's one thing that's gone well for you personally? What's one thing that's gone well for you professionally? Those those things are really important, and I don't think that we do enough of them. And team meetings provide kind of the foundation and the vehicle for begin having those conversations and nurturing ourselves, not just as professionals in this work, because it is really, really tough work. It's also amazing work when we get to watch people get their lives back, but it's tough. It's really hard work. So we have to be creating space within our units of support to talk about these things and to test things, to test tools. Maybe you take this out and you test it with someone and it bombs and it fails. So you come back to the drawing board with your team and talk about it. This didn't work. I would like some ideas about ways to try this again in a different way that maybe could be more effective. So we're constantly sharing and dialoguing about those experiences, personally and professionally. So I think team meetings are a great vehicle to support each other, not just on a professional level, but on a personal level as well. Now more than ever, we all need that. We all need it.
Very nice. There was a participant that said for them it's been really challenging to create self-care plans with teenagers because oftentimes they just don't know. So some of them are not really self-aware of their triggers or what's working, etc. So any questions or just ideas of how to explore this kind of self-awareness and wellness management with teens?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I think first and foremost, sometimes teens can feel allergic to the formal language of the systems and all of the things we use within our systems of care. And so recognizing that and honing in on what is the language that the young adult is using to describe their experiences and reflecting that language. That's their preference. But also, again, I think really it goes back to relationship building and really working very strategically to build trust with that person in the hopes of drawing out what it is that feels good to them in times of roughness or darkness. So it continues to be just a process. This dialogue with people, whether it's young adults or whether it's older adults or whether it's middle-aged adults, really focusing on the process, I think is the most important thing. And that it's not going to be an overnight thing. Like, right, if things happened very easily overnight and people were activating self-care and understanding how it works in their life, we would be working ourselves out of a job, which I hope we do one day. Like, that's the goal of our work, is to support someone in moving forward without us. But it's just recognizing that it's going to take time, especially for young adults and teens, building trust, reflecting their language, and staying curious and committed to the effort about understanding all of the different portals into their world. Sometimes I think when we can take time to genuinely listen and learn about what someone is interested in or what holds meaning to them, even if it's far out there, even if we have no idea what that means, we're staying curious with that and taking time to listen and learn and allow the team's knowledge to be our own. I think it's a matter of recognizing that the people we work with, young adults in particular, have just as much to offer us in knowledge and expertise that we have to give back and support. Like, that idea makes the work transformative and builds a trusting, equitable relationship with people, which makes it easier to help identify and have those conversations with young adults about what are their feel goods, what do you do in your free time. You mentioned you're on the computer 10 hours a day. What is it you're doing on the computer? Tell me about that. What is that experience like for you? It's engagement, curiosity, and taking time. And recognizing that teens may have a very unique way of describing their experiences, and it's really important we reflect and honor the language and ways that they describe their experiences as well.
Great, thanks, Kelly. There were kind of several different questions that were related to like using substances as a coping strategy. So one specific one was we're talking with a youth that they list marijuana as one of their ways to cope. How do you have a discussion about those types of things in relation to wellness management without judgment?
Yeah, boy, staying out of judgment is hard, especially when we all like it as much as we do. So harm reduction is about staying out of judgment. Relapse prevention is about staying out of judgment. And that's really hard. And I think, again, it goes back to the idea of staying curious. What is the active ingredient of using marijuana that helps someone? What does it do for the person? What is the active ingredient? So maybe someone smokes marijuana because then they're around other people. Maybe that's their only means to have social contact, is to be with people who also smoke. And so then maybe conversations become about, gosh, would you like to meet other people, make more friends, support networks, all of those things. But it's really exploring what is the active ingredient of why that substance is helpful. And with permission, exploring with people what that may look like in other capacities in their life. But it's also important to recognize what stage of change someone is in, because we don't want to just run in and start throwing tools and resources in their face if they don't view it as a problem, right? And for a lot of people, marijuana in particular is not a problem. And so then we leave it. If they recognize that as their truth and that helps them get through the day, then we recognize it as their truth and we move on. But it's definitely a different conversation in California, because in Kansas we don't have legalization. We don't even have medicinal legalization here. So it's interesting, but it's also exciting just to hear how those conversations are changing across the nation, and how we're recognizing that using marijuana is harm reduction, and it is a vehicle to wellness in different capacities for so many people, including youth. And so staying curious about, how is that a vehicle for wellness? What are you getting out of that? What's the active ingredient? I think all of those things are important.
Hey, thanks, Kelly. There's another one that, in a lot of the language that you've used about this topic, participants said that it reminded them of intercultural communication approaches, staying curious, staying out of judgment, taking on another's perspective. Do you agree with that kind of comparison, and say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree on that comparison. We all come into this with very unique ways of being in the world and experiencing the world. And so being able to honor how people experience the world is really important in this work, and reflecting the language that people are using to describe their experiences. It's very, very important. Yeah, and I might want a little bit more time to think about that one. So if there's a way we could make note of that question, because I think maybe some extra time just to process that. Yeah, that's a really great question.
Yeah, and once again, is that there are so many great questions that are coming into the question box. So we'll give you a lot more time to be able to kind of respond to these and get those answers up on the website. So I'll just pick a few more. This is another one that it's not just one question, it's actually multiple people that have said something basically to the extent that they've been able to identify some self-management strategies, but the person still has a lot of difficulty actually doing it. So just some ideas about, helping, people go from that point of identifying something to actually carrying it out, and maybe even some specific ideas for how do you support people with that while you're using telehealth.
Yeah, That's a great question. So if someone has said that something is helpful, but they're not actually doing it or using it in space of intensity or darkness or uncertainty or whatever it looks like for that person. My first instinct as a practitioner is to always go back again and stay curious and see if that is something that really is effective for that person, or is that something that's been prescribed to them from someone else in their life? If someone else telling them you need to do this because it will help you, or something they've heard from a professional in their life, well, this is what I need to do. But if it's not something that the person actually is passionate about, something that is part of their own truth, not something that's been given or prescribed to them, it's always good to go back and explore that. Is this something that really makes a difference in your life? How does it do that? How has it made a difference in your life before? I think it goes back to the idea of helping people connect what they're doing to how they're feeling. And so if a person can't describe necessarily how that activity is helpful, maybe it's because it's not their activity to begin with. Maybe it's something they've been told they need to do. So again, really staying in space with that person about, well, what is your truth? What are the things that you enjoy doing? And someone may not have anything. They may not have any answers right now. And so when that happens, I always like to go back to, well, tell me a time before all of this happened, what you enjoyed doing. What was one thing you used to feel good doing? And bringing up strengths from the past sometimes can be helpful to identify strengths from the current, and help someone make movement. So I think, again, it just really, I feel like it's kind of the same answers in all of these questions, but that's wonderful because there's like a golden thread that connects them all together. Is that activity something that person is really passionate about? Or is it something they've been told they need to do? Are there any barriers to the person carrying out that activity? And is there space within those barriers for you to offer support? Or is it because someone hasn't really figured out what it is that holds healing and nurturing values in their life? And if that's the case, we want to go all the way back to the beginning and explore things that maybe they used to do, that made them feel good and made them feel connected to themselves, and use that as a starting place. So several things within that.
All right. Thank you so much, Kelly. So we're at the end of our time, and so once again, I just want to thank you, Kelly, for just this extremely informative presentation. Not only were there great questions, which you'll get to see all the questions at the end of this, but also there were some really good positive comments and just stuff, people just reacting in real time just to the webinar. Second, I would also like to thank again the California Healthcare Foundation for sponsoring this webinar series. And finally, I really want to just extend a huge thank you to all of you for not only attending this webinar, but also just offering us information about your own learning around self-management support.